Hey, welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
If you're gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small.
Hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 254 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Thank you, as like every week, for lending me your ears today. I know there are lots of choices out there for podcasts and other things to be doing in your day, and I do sincerely appreciate you making my podcast one of the things that you did today. If you are enjoying this podcast, though, I would love for you to take a screenshot or to do a shout out on socials, anything where you can tag me so that I can get to know you a little bit more like you get to know me by listening to this podcast. That would be super, super cool. Of course, the show notes for this particular podcast episode can be found at all the W's, socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/254. Before we head into this week's episode, did you get a chance to listen to last week's episode where I was talking about my word of the year and also maybe giving you a bit of a nudge about your word of the year that you may or may not have created at the start of the year? Or if you didn't, maybe you need to create a word of the year for the second half of the year. Anyway, I enjoyed making that podcast episode. Lots of people have reached out and said that it was a really great nudge for them heading into the second half of the year. So head back there and have a listen if you haven't already to episode 253. Of course, a shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, which is Cloud House Consulting. Imagine working with someone who loves your numbers. Think less stress and 100% support. And think Bromlin and the team at Cloud House Consulting. Bromlin from Cloud House Consulting was actually a guest on my podcast way back on episode 158. So head back there and have a listen to that one as well. It was all about 3 reasons why you should keep an eye on your number, because that's what the team at Cloud House Consulting do for you. They support you and keep an eye on your numbers and teach you more that you need to know about your numbers. They are the team that you need on hand to master the basics, but they also have all the other stuff covered as well. In fact, Brolin has an ebook titled Kitchen Table Empires, which I really love the title because many of us have literally started building empires around our kitchen tables. The ebook is a great reference guide to everything you should know and everything you need to do in business, including perhaps queries around GST registration, employment basics, cash flow, and budgeting. You can find it at cloudhouse.consulting. My guest today is Peta D. Now, Peta D, her D is not her surname, but her surname is something like Diamond Titanitis, and I'm going to pronounce that really bad. So Peta goes by Peta D. So that's what we're going to call her today, Peta D. You can see her surname in the show notes if you like. And if you haven't heard of her, trust me, you will be Googling the crap out of her by the time we finish this episode because it is amazing. Peta is in finance, but this is no ordinary finance chat. We are talking about imagination capital in your business. Yes, imagination capital. It is a concept that Peter D talks about, and today's episode is going to be all about that. And I'm so excited to be digging into something that's just a little bit different when it comes to reimagining what our finance and our financial thinking is around our business. Peter is the author of the book Finance Action Hero and can be found in the wild, empowering trainee misfits and explorers as a speaker, a coach, and the host of In Search of Adventure show. This is probably one of my favorite chats. It was just so good. I can't wait for you to have a listen and importantly, take some action. So here's Peter and Imagination Capital Chats. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the podcast. I'm stoked to have you on today.
Ooh, I'm excited.
It's so good. We've had a couple of cancellations, we've had a couple of illnesses,
Yeah.
and I think we even had a tire that broke down at one stage, but
Yeah.
we are here, we are chatting. Um, for my amazing listener who may not have come across you or would just like to learn more, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yes. So that's such a hard question sometimes, isn't it? So I wish I was like my husband who's a carpenter, right? There's the answer. He can just say, I'm a
Yeah,
carpenter.
we all know
Right?
what a carpenter
I know.
does.
We all know.
Yes,
It's good.
yes.
Yeah. Whereas sometimes it's harder for those of us in service businesses or anything like that. So my business is in financial advice. And we specialize in, the Gen X generation, juggling everything and helping them sort
Yeah.
it all out and really lean into life. That's expanded though. Love speaking. I love getting out there and engaging the public. And so I've been doing a lot of team building and motivational work with small businesses. And so it's sort of expanded into doing facilitations and speaking at conferences and events. And so all of the things that I help individuals with are the sort of things that we end up needing for our small business, whether that's motivation or organisation or adulting sometimes. So that's the crossover. And if I'm perfectly honest, the thing I love is the human connection. So while I am a maths geek and my background is actuarial studies, which is like uber maths geek, the thing that actually lights
Tell
me
us
up
what that is. Tell us
actuarial
what-
studies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actuarial studies is financial mathematics. So it's basically my uni life was the Big Bang Theory. I went to uni with Sheldons.
Ah.
Yes. So
Mm.
deeply literal, deeply mathematical, super bright. They're super bright, but I stood out just a little as being a little different because I'm more into
Yeah.
storytelling and presenting and all those sort of things. So
And human connection,
I know
one might
humans.
say.
Yeah, not robots. It's awesome.
Yeah. Although I'm starting to head down the line of robots sound like a good idea.
What's that movie with the big, nice, the cuddly robot, the big white one that was the care robot that would give you a cuddle? I'm all for a robot like that. Like if you could just once in a while, I just need a hug. That'd be lovely.
Mine's more about cooking, cook for me, clean for me, all that
Yes.
sort of thing.
Definitely.
Oh dear. Well, you sound like you've got a lot of knowledge to share. I'm not sure we're going to go as deep as that sort of scientific mathematics today.
No, everybody can relax.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
And just one other clarification. You mentioned Gen X. If my listener is going, I don't know who that is. Who's Gen X?
Right. So anybody who wonders who Gen X is one. Is the rule of thumb. Would you believe we're the only generation that doesn't know who we are? It's hysterical. Right. It's so true. Everybody else, baby boomers know who they are. Millennials know who they are. So if you don't know and you're listening, you are Gen X. I think a better name is Walkman generation. So if you grew up with a Walkman, you're in Gen X. And so really it's sort of 40s, 50s. Is the age group. We look after older clients. We've got clients all the way up to their mid-90s, but the people that we're sort of starting to focus on is sort of the forgotten generation, really, which is sort of what Gen X feels like.
Yeah, and certainly from a marketing point of view, I remember having a really great conversation with Katrina McCarter quite a few times about how we are the generation that's not marketed to. We kind of get forgotten, and yet we have all the power. So
And money,
someone like
I might add.
myself, the power and the money, and basically, like in this generation, like my age, so I'm 48. I'm pretty sure I'm 48. I'm helping my mum and dad out with their finances, and I'm still helping my children out. So I'm pretty powerful to market to. I have a lot of control over a lot of money over a lot of generations, and yet I feel like very forgotten. So it's a little nudge to any marketers that might be listening to this podcast to think, how do you market to Gen X? But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, because when I asked you to come on the podcast, you talked very curiously for me about imagination capital, and I was like, I have no idea what that means, but I want to know more.
Yes.
So let's start there.
What's
imagination capital?
Imagination capital is hidden gold that you've got in your business that are unrealized ideas, right? So it's having like a big vault full of potential ready and waiting for you to unleash it in the future. So the opposite of that is when we're running around and we're like, gee, I need to grow. And we sit and we just have no earthly clue where to start. There isn't anything we can refer to that says, you know what, if I just went and did this or implemented that or started to market to them. So it's having this bank, this huge bank of ideas that have been collected over time, ready to unleash on your business in the future. And it's something that, look, I created the expression imagination capital. But
trademark, people, trademark.
Sorry, what was that?
Trademark. We've trademarked that.
Yes, exactly. Quick. Exactly. But it's the idea also came from the fact that in large corporates, which none of us and probably nobody listening are in, but in large corporates, they talk a lot about human capital, right? And that's the people and the resources, and you've got to invest in human capital. And I agree with that. But I think for small business particularly, we don't have that many people. What we need is ready solutions for when we encounter either a challenge or an opportunity in the future. And so to me, that's where imagination capital sort of sits. And it's if you can build that and nurture it and develop it, then you'll never run out of growth. You'll never run out of the next idea. And you'll probably have empowered the staff you do have to run with it without you. I don't know about you, but one of the most tiring aspects of being a small business owner is always having to be the one to come up with the next idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can somebody else please?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas by developing this as a skill effectively in yourself, but also your team, then actually you get to the point, which is where we have got with our business, where you can't keep up with them. They're just running with this. They're loving it. They're really developing the imagination capital. And then when the opportunity comes up, they come up to you and go, we're ready. Let's jump. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where it comes from.
Wow.
But interestingly, it comes down to just some really basic characteristics in people. It's curiosity and it's courage. That's really what we've got to develop, right? Curiosity and courage. And if you think about in any, and it can be any business, if you have a team meeting, often those two character traits are discouraged in any meeting. So it could be just a few of you and you're talking about, you've got an agenda and there's a certain thing you're covering and somebody goes, you know what, I just came across this really cool thing that this business across the way was doing. I wondered whether that should be something we should consider, right? So they've bothered to notice, they've connected it to an opportunity for your business and they've brought it up, right? Curiosity and courage in spades. And unfortunately, our instinct is to go, look, that's not the meeting we're having. We've got to focus on this thing to get it done. That's great, but I need you to refocus on this other issue, whatever it is. And so we habitually discount and sort of set aside those efforts by our team members. And it's repeated. You'll start to notice it now. Anytime you get together with people, you'll start to notice this behavior where we sort of train them out of curiosity. We train them not to speak up. Right. And so
we do it to ourselves though as well, don't we? We might come up with something like for myself, I might come up with something for my business and I either label it as a bright, shiny object and stick to the goal, Jennifer Ann, stop. Yep. Or I don't have time for that. And I hopefully am trained well enough that I will actually even just write it down just so if it can fall out of my head, but it's still written down.
Absolutely.
But we also discourage ourselves because we are busy being busy in our own businesses.
100%. And you're right. And we condition ourselves to think it's bad. Right. And I'm with you. I have a bit of that attention deficit, shiny. And it was squirrel. But it's realizing that actually noticing something and recognizing its value is actually a superpower. So all we've got to do is have a habit or a behavior that captures that in a useful way, then lets you get on with the thing you were focusing on. So that's the trick, is not making this a bad thing, not going, oh, you're distracted. It's like, no, that's great. Fantastic. That's the idea. Awesome. I'm putting it in the ideas vault and then having a schedule to go and visit the ideas vault vault on certain, it could be a cycle. It could be once a quarter with your team. It could be once a month. And you just give yourself an hour or two, you dive into this big, long list of ideas and go, well, are there any problems we're facing or things we want to do that we want to jump into one of those? Right. So it also means you're not reacting to a great idea just off the cuff. You're actually looking at a list of great ideas and choosing the best one for now.
Okay.
So it's a prioritization thing too that helps.
Yeah. So what's your suggestion on where we should keep these great ideas that we come up with?
So if we don't actually have a vault, which I'm betting most of us don't, although I feel like, as somebody who would love to be that evil villain or the villain in a movie and have the big vault, like I think that's just, doesn't get better than that. But in case you don't actually have a vault,
I'm thinking of Despicable Me about now.
Right,
I reckon he would have had a vault.
he would have, exactly. Can you imagine? If you don't have that, then Trello is perfect.
Yeah.
A Trello board, it's called your ideas vault, and you and the team know any meeting, any discussion, anything you're doing, the ideas vault can sit open on the side, and anytime somebody comes up with something awesome, we acknowledge it. We said, that sounds fantastic. Let's put it in the ideas vault, and then let's get on with the meeting. And they know that means in a month or in a quarter or whenever, we're going to revisit that. So it's acknowledging it, it's encouraging the behavior, but it's also putting it in a place to be dealt with in the future.
Yeah.
So Trello is perfect, or anything similar.
Yeah. Mine's probably a whiteboard.
Yep.
My harebrain ideas, as I refer to them, go on whiteboards so that they're there a little bit front and center, which is probably not what you're saying. You're saying, schedule out some time to actually give yourself that time to go deep. So you've kind of mentioned maybe monthly or quarterly. What have you found works, or is it really just individualized?
It is. So monthly, but what happens is people get really excited about this, and the team gets really excited, because then they'll start adding a whole lot of things to the ideas vault and like, I think we should do this monthly. The problem with monthly is generally a month is not enough time to implement the one idea you choose to implement. So then you start chasing your tail a little bit. So I like quarterly. And it's short enough to feel like, okay, let's pick a project that we could knock off in that quarter, feel good about. It's long enough to test it and have a bit of a play, so that then when we come back in our next ideas get together and brainstorm, then we can reflect on the one we did. What did we learn? What were the wins? And then we can pick another one. So I think quarterly is great. And also, there is this habit of letting go the squirrel ideas for long enough, so that's all right. It's a way. I'll get to it in a quarter. And a quarter, we all know that comes around fast, right? I mean, for goodness sake,
Yes. Yeah,
it's actually not that long. We're talking 90 days here.
Right.
So I find that cycle is perfect. And I love the idea of, even if it's just yourself, it could be yourself with a great accountability buddy, and you do this together. So if you're on your own and it's like, Peter, really? Yes. Have your ideas vault, put things in there, get together. You could even give it half a day, once a quarter, and you both go through and go, all right, what are we picking? What are we going to work on? What do we like? And I love this. I actually have my Trello ideas vault open, and that's how I take notes at conferences. So the only notes I take are things I put on the board. That's sort of how I take notes at conferences, because that's really what happens, right? We'll go, ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, I want to do that. Or, that's what conferences are like, right? So instead of writing them down with lots of notes and then transporting them somewhere else, my experience, I don't know about you, was I never got to that second step of me transporting them somewhere else. So I put them in my ideas vault at the conference. And
that is a sensational tip, because how many times, and I'm as guilty as anybody else, how many times have we been to a conference, taken notes, come home, put that workbook on the shelf, opened our computer and started our day like we normally would have it, like if we hadn't have gone to the conference at all. Exactly.
And I was finding too that, I'm a crazy note taker. It's just the way I absorb things. It's sort of almost like I'm not going to be able to absorb the idea until it's through my pen. Like it's just the way that things go into my brain. But what I realized was that I was doing that, but I wasn't focusing on the gold until much later. Whereas the fact that I'm not going to type it all up, I'm only going to listen and absorb great ideas and then dump them into that vault, knowing that I'll go back to it later. It's really empowering. It's fantastic, you know?
What about for the person who might be listening? And I have to say, I might fall into this category every now and then of you are afraid that you'll miss something. So if we take the conference analogy, for instance, and you're only taking notes for things that pique your interest at the time, I'm a great believer in, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So
Yeah.
sometimes I take notes going, well, I actually don't know what that would look like in my business, but I'll put it down anyway, or I'll note that they said that. So, and if I was only looking for the gold, I might brush over that type of thing. So how do you deal with the fear that you might, if you don't put everything down you think about, you might actually miss that piece of gold?
Yeah, so it's a really valid point because I'm not sure we're any good at evaluating the gold ourselves in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the point of this stuff, right? Is we're not good at assessing that because our brain is trying to process a whole lot of things. And there's probably some problem we have that's distracting our brain from everything else. And so all it's looking for is that. It's like, just solve this, would you please? And it could be that your car's broken down. It has nothing to do with the conference you're at. So,
Yeah.
so right, our brains are all a lizard brain.
Oh, you're hungry. You're waiting for lunch.
Exactly. Must be lunchtime by now, So my view with collecting ideas in the ideas vault is not to limit whether they're possible and even whether they're relevant. It's just something that piques your interest. That's all it is. It's like, ooh. So, I mean, this happens to me all the time. I'm in financial advice and I fully intend to go to the Australian Space Conference that's coming up later in the year, right? Now, I don't expect there's going to be many business lessons for a financial advice practice at an Australian Space Agency conference. I'm going there out of personal interest. I'm a space geek. But there'll be something that piques my interest. It might be an automation thing or I will add them in. So I'll put those in if it piques my interest or there's some paper somebody's written or a YouTube video they go and check out, I add all that stuff in. You just never know how it's going to relate. I think this can be helpful too with content, right? So writing content is you could have an ideas vault just for your content marketing efforts because you come across something cool. You don't know when you're going to write about it, but let's just collect that cool thing somewhere. That great video you saw or a quote you loved or you don't know where it's going yet, but you need to collect it. That's what the ideas vault is.
Yeah, I love that suggestion because I often see those things and I've got them saved on my phone. I've got reels saved in draft in Instagram. I've got a whiteboard up there with content ideas, but they're not somewhere. They are everywhere. Like I've collected them, but I've got to remember to go back and find them. And sometimes, one of my habits that I have is when I'm on an airplane and there's no Wi-Fi, I don't know what I'm going to do when there is Wi-Fi on an airplane. It's going to wreck my routine. But that's when I delete all the photos that I don't need on my phone anymore. And that's where I often see a thing like, oh, I remember doing that, collecting that. It's a really cool idea. I'll put that in my favorites now. I've refound it. Still isn't in a vault.
No.
Gone from one place to another.
Correct. And what's interesting, the lesson with all of this, and this is going to just sound a bit daggy and boring, but it's really valuable, is every time you look at those, right? So the first time you caught it, whatever it is, and you saved it, and then every time you look, you've categorized those things in your brain somehow. You've said, you know what, that's a great quote for a future blog post about blah, right? You've done it as the processing.
Yep.
The trick is we just need to categorize it like that once up front and put it somewhere.
Yeah.
And then our brain doesn't have to revisit and circle and circle and revisit and circle and circle and revisit it. What we do is we know, geez, I need a whole lot of suggested topics. I know where I'll go. Right. So that's the beauty of Trello is because of the way it's set out, it's got those sort of columns of cards. They're a bit like Post-it notes, really. Imagine columns of Post-it notes. Then you could just have one that's great quotes. And every time you see one of those, like you see them on Instagram or whatever, you might take I do this all the time, like a screenshot of something and then save it in photos. I'm like, Peter, what are you doing? Like, where's it going to go after you've done that? For goodness sake. Well, now they go in a quotes column in my ideas vault, ready for when I want to rustle something up. for content.
Mm.
So
So
it's
Trello
that
can
one
be
step.
mobile phone as well
Yes.
as desktop? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. And you
Very
could have
good.
more than one. So you could have one for the business that the whole team has access to. That's the one you use in team meetings, or
Mhm.
even with your consultants or anybody else you've got that work with you, just as that. Let's add things on there as they come up and let's revisit it. You could also then have a personal one that's just
Yeah.
your own sort of mad brain caught in one place. There are
Yeah.
other tools. There's lots of apps out there that help with this, that are sort of using AI to try and capture that. I find most people, particularly in our generation, need a little more order than sort of random collation. So,
Yeah.
columns on Trello work, sort of like I can
Yes.
handle that. Like I can get
Yeah.
that far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost the principle Pinterest was built on. Like,
Yes,
that's what we have Pinterest boards for, isn't it?
absolutely. It's exactly that. This is a Pinterest board for the future growth of your business. That's what you call it, like you do for the wedding. They have a Pinterest
Yeah.
board. And it's here's the ideas for this, and here's the. It's that for your business. And it's what I love about it. So I frequently go and look at ours, and it's actually quite motivating. It can get you a bit excited. So when you're in the middle of something that's a bit tough, and it's like, oh, killing me, with the dry, maybe it's come around to tax time, whatever it is that's a bit tough to deal with, then often I'll just spend, I'll put aside a little bit of time, 15 minutes, and I'll just sort of sit and look through the ideas vault and go, okay, this is what I'm working towards. This is what we can do. Here are the opportunities. And it sort of gives you that little rev up that you need sometimes. So it's fun. It's a fun way to operate. Yeah, for sure.
So do you have, just to dive just a little bit deeper, so we've got this ideas vault, we've gone to it, it's the end of May, so it's the end of, well, that's not actually the end of the quarter, it's the start of April, it's the start of a new quarter, and we've gone in there to have a bit of a look. Is there any system or a systematic way of distinguishing gold from rubbish at that particular time with all the ideas? Do you have any suggestions or tips?
100%. Yes, absolutely. The best idea is going to be the solution to a problem you have right now.
Love that.
Right. So most people, me included, being very open and honest here, great idea. Oh, must implement. Great idea. Oh, must implement. Like, woohoo. Whereas I've got some very dry, boring challenge, and I don't mean problem as in disaster, but just something you're facing in the business that I'm just not solving. That's the thing we should solve for first. And there's a couple of reasons. One is it's a morale builder. When you solve things that are like day-to-day irritations in the business, it gives everybody a lift. And it also almost always gives you more capacity. Anytime you solve a problem in your business, it gives you more capacity, which will let you dive in and do something else that you want to do in the business or any other problems you have. So the Ideas Vault is the collection of solutions. Our job is to be aware of the problems or challenges we're facing in our business, whatever they are. It could be that you don't have enough new leads. It could be that it's taking too long to process something or get something done for clients. Whatever they are, then it's sort of collating the challenges you have in the business. Now, for some people, that's not easy. It can be the most recent thing that feels like it stands up. They don't have
the easiest.
Yeah.
That's easy. I'll do that one.
Yeah, 100%. So something we actually do, it's sort of a 1-2 punch with the Ideas Vault, is we call them pirate workshops. So a pirate workshop, and you only need a couple of you, but you can get more than that if you've got a bigger team. What you're looking for are the things in the business that you go, so they frustrate you, right? They're really irritating, right? So we get the.
I was thinking you had to look at them one-eyed or something like
maybe,
that, but no, it's the grrr bit. Okay.
Right? So the pirate workshop is a way of getting everybody to note down on Post-it notes a whole lot of the things that are just challenging them on the day-to-day. This is not about whining. This is about identifying themes. So things that just keep on popping up, and they all get an opportunity to put them up on the wall, as little Post-its. And what you start to see is some standout problems because they've got 30 Post-it notes next to them, whereas there's one over there that's just on its own. So we do that consistently of what's getting in the way, what did we miss out on, what could we have done better for clients, what are all those things. We get the team to come up with at least 10 on post-its. Once they get practice, they can come up with up to 20, and then we take turns putting them up one at a time, and you start to see groups. And the one we then actually vote, would you believe? So we get them all up there, and they'll come up into themes. It's called affinity workshopping, and when you've got themes, everybody gets some stars to vote. And so they get 10 stars, and they can vote them 10 on one thing, one problem, or they can spread them out. It's up to the team members. And based on what's got the most stars, that's the problem we solve.
Wow. Okay.
So and the reason we do that is, as business owners, we're just not necessarily the best people to identify the smallest but most impactful problems. We're just not because we're not necessarily doing all those things. So you might have VAs you use, you might have there's all these people you might interact with, and you don't have a huge team. We're not big corporates, but you have some people you work with, and you don't realize, and this has happened, I've seen this in professional services businesses, that the poor person using the scanner's so bad, it's taking hours a day to scan documents that come in from clients. Now, when you do this affinity workshopping, those things come out, and the whole team's like, oh my goodness, this is the most irritating thing in my day. It drives me nuts. And all you got to do is fix the fax. So, sorry, the scanner. So it's making sure that everybody in your team, both internal and external, can get their views out, even the quiet ones,
Yeah.
And, for a team like mine, as you can tell, love talking, gregarious, all that sort of stuff, then it's really important we have a democratic way that everybody can have a voice, because, if we don't do that, then my ideas and my thoughts are going to be louder. And that's not the way I want to lead, So this is a great way for somebody who's quieter, who maybe is a watcher, those people that are more likely to watch what's going on, less likely to say something. They have the gold.
Yeah.
And I do this with teams. So when I facilitate these sessions for businesses, then they're the people I ask about first, because I want to meet them. They'll be able to, with encouragement, they'll be able to come up with a list of fantastic things we should solve in the business, because they watch all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, I think I just had trauma flashbacks to my law days and trying to photocopy briefs that were unbelievable, and you'd need 3 meters of pink ribbon to tie them with. And how much do we all wish we invented sticky notes? Oh my gosh. Oh.
See, that and gaffer tape, they're the two things I don't think we can do without in life. When the zombie apocalypse comes, those things will solve everything. For sure.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. Peter, this has been such a great chat. You've been so wonderful with all your tips and tricks. And I think this episode is going to create so much curiosity in my listener. They are probably Googling how to set up a Trello board right now.
I hope so. It's super easy too, I might add. So please go and check it out. If anybody's curious, I do have an Imagination Capital scorecard. So it'll help you get a feel for where you're at with this, and give you a few tips of where you can focus, and ways you can even help your staff be more curious. So feel free, have a bit of a play with that. It's free, and then it'll point you in the right direction.
And I'll put a link to that in my show notes. You'll send me over the link to that. And I'll put a link in my show notes. That would be great. And Peter, if someone wants to get in contact with you, where do you hang out? Is there a particular social platform or a particular place that people could learn a little bit more about you?
Probably best on LinkedIn. I'm Peiter MD, PEITAMD. There's not many Peters, honestly, on LinkedIn. So if you start typing PEITA and then look for a big, long Greek surname, that'll be me, the redhead. So please reach out. I'd love to have a chat or understand what everybody's doing in their business.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a brilliant chat about Imagination Capital.
You're welcome, and everybody enjoy their day.
Thanks. Was that great or what? I hope you loved that interview as much as I loved having that chat with Peter D. So, what's your imagination capital look like in your business? I would so love to keep having this conversation with you. So, join me and join the fun inside my Like Minded Business Owners Facebook group. You can find the link in show notes or go to Facebook and type in Like Minded Business Owners. And let's have a bit of a chat over there about what imagination capital looks like in your business. But that's it for episode 254. If you love this episode and found some value in it, please take 30 seconds to leave a rating and a review of this podcast episode, if that's possible where you are listening, or take half of that 30 seconds and reach out to Peta. All the links, of course, are in the show notes for all of her socials. But if you can do either of those things, thank you so much in advance. I will, of course, be back for next week's episode, which is episode 255. Thanks again to Cloud House Consulting for sponsoring today's episode. Don't forget about their ebook that you can find at cloudhouse.consulting. But in the meantime, let's hang out and get social and social. If we're not already, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. But whatever you do, remember, my small business peep, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.